Hello everyone. Today, our team 10, which includes me, Nyamat, Isabel, Kiana, and Mandy, we are going to discuss on the topic reducing inequality to alleviate poverty. We will explore the relationship between inequality and poverty and how addressing this former situation can make a significant impact in creating a more equitable society. In our first podcast, we already discussed about inequality, which refer to unequal distribution of wealth, income, opportunities among individuals or like groups within the society. But poverty, on the other hand, is a condition where people lack the financial resources to meet their basic needs for a decent standard of living. These two issues are intricately linked with each other, and today we will delve into how reducing inequality can play a vital role in alleviating poverty. So first, I want to ask you guys the question that the mechanism through which inequality contributes to poverty. When I was researching about this topic, I got to know that the unequal distribution of income and job opportunities can result in a scarcity of well-paying jobs for the majority of population. This can force many people and even family into getting low wage, making it challenging for them to escape poverty. So what's your opinion on this?
Um, I think in the first podcast I did mention like income inequalities, and they do have substantial like impacts on countries. And regardless of like how well a country is doing, like even for example Canada, you can see that like the wage gap has been increasing over the years, and because of that, it has affected individuals who were considered like middle lower class are now considered lower class because the wage gap has been increasing substantially, right? So
Yeah.
what it does is it doesn't really provide opportunities for individuals who are from low income households to be able to have the same opportunities from those who are from higher income households, whether it be for education, jobs, sports. It's just easier for those type of families who are from higher incomes to have exposure to those type of opportunities. And whereas individuals who are from lower income, it's much more difficult for them to be exposed or even uh, acknowledge that those type of opportunities are available for them. So I do think like even if an individual doesn't want to be in a lower income household anymore, and they're trying to make certain um, they're trying to make certain uh, like steps forward to get themselves out of there, it's more difficult for them because they just don't have the accessibility that you know another person may have.
Yeah. Isabel?
Yeah, I would agree with Mandy. I do think like it's just a lack of resource and opportunity. Like once you're kind of in like once you don't have that access, like it's hard to get it. And um yeah, I don't know how to explain it, but it just like it I feel like it's almost kind of like quicksand. Like once you're in it, it just keeps getting worse and worse. And to try and get out of it would just require so much like work and effort, and sometimes it in that moment it'll just feel like unattainable, and then I feel like the person or the family would just slowly start feeling like giving up because it just seems so unreachable.
Just to add to like Isabel's point, I think like the whole quicksand idea is very, very like it's something that a lot of people can relate with, because what you see is like a lot of people are like, oh, why don't you invest with your money, or why don't you do this with your money? But it's like some people live kind of paycheck to paycheck, so their priorities come before doing anything else with their money, whereas like individuals who are privileged enough to be born within a wealthy family, they do have certain savings accounts or certain investment stock portfolios, or they have done something with their money to be able to allow it to grow on their own. Whereas individuals who, need money to be able to cover their basic necessities don't really have that option of using whatever like end up money, like savings that they have to be used in that type of way, like where they can be, be used as for other investments, because they need to be able to afford food. They need to be able to afford their home. They need to be able to afford clothes on their back. And by the time that they have any savings, you don't know when something's going to pop up that they're not going to be able to afford, for example, like their car breaking down or, something. So they don't really have that luxury.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I agree with both Mandy and Isabella, especially about working to survive. I feel like people that are living paycheck to paycheck can barely get ahead, let alone have the opportunity to grow financially. So I just feel like it's a lot of missed opportunity for them.
Yeah. And also, like in our previous podcast, we discussed about, biases. So, in what ways do you think that the societal attitudes or perception can contribute to a certificate that they have an idea of poverty and inequality? Like, is can that create barriers for certain type of groups to not get a job or to not put themselves out in the society, which can, force them to stay in poverty?
I definitely think it's the Indigenous group. I think there is a huge bias against them. I think people have these misconceptions about how they are, and they tend to judge them as a group instead of individually as what they can be presented. I don't think our government has given them the proper tools needed to become, successful within life. I think they've kind of written them off and have allow them to fend for themselves. And fortunately, there are some really good band leaders out there that have taken upon themselves to make their community better. And they have, stepped up and taken on these roles as like, you know, either dealing with many different departments, but having many different hats on so they can have their people actually succeed. Yeah, I think our country completely wrote them off. And then like, just think like giving them their reserves is going to help, but most of the housing that they provided is not up to par. Like it's not really livable, or it requires repair. Yeah, I think that's one of the most biased groups here in Canada for sure.
Yeah,
And
I
I think,
agree.
a lot of people too, like have these misconceptions of who they are, and they think, okay, well, I don't want to deal with them. That's just the thought of it, which is horrible.
Yeah. Kiana, do you have anything to add?
I was just gonna go off of what Mandy said. I do agree the Indigenous people are hugely discriminated against, and a lot of the times they don't have, water on their reserves or Wi-Fi to even apply for jobs. And I think people can be biased towards them because they don't have the necessary resources to take care of themselves. So people will judge them heavily based off that, but also people with disabilities are discriminated against. But I think Canada's big marginalized group is definitely the Indigenous people.
Yeah. Isabel?
I also agree, like Indigenous people like are like the biggest group. Kiana mentioned like those with like disabilities. I think another group would be kind of like single moms, and kind of just like what Mandy said, as instead of viewing them separately, like as individuals, like just classifying all like single moms that have like the same background and like story, I guess. But like when I guess like a single mom that applies for a job, like some single moms could have like help from parents or like help from grandparents or like other resources where they can like they have more resources, but because like I feel like sometimes like hiring managers, they just hear the word single mom and they hear like, oh, like this individual is probably gonna have to like ask to leave work early or ask for more time off or all those things. and not look at the person as an individual and what they actually have to offer.
Yeah. And we are living in this modern century where everybody is allowed to have their own point of view, and we can easily communicate more openly than we can ever before. There's technology, there's different platforms, everything. But there are still challenges which reduce the implementation of certain strategies to implement inequality bases and reduce poverty on a global scale. So, what do you think are these challenges mainly contributing to inequality in organizations? Like, is there like resource constraint, or do you think that the government is not implementing more policies, or do you think it's just the perception, or like it's the situation is so complex that people are not putting forward their point of view? What do you think is the major challenges?
I think we live in a society where it's been a certain way for so many years that it's hard to implement change.
Yeah,
Like, for example, like even back in like the 1800s, it was more of a patriarchal society where like it was mainly men being the breadwinners of the home, till like I think the early 19 like till the 1900s, like from the early 1800s, that we have so far known from throughout history books, that like majority of the places, especially like the place that we live right now, is a you know patriarchal society, and then men are the breadwinners and they're the main workers, so it's hard to kind of see that. And that like maybe women can also be the breadwinners, or see like other genders step up, and also see like visible minorities being working in the workplace, because we're so used to seeing like the white male CEO. We haven't really seen, it's when we do see people of color, it's very rarely seen within higher up positions. um Maybe we see it more now, but still it's not up to it doesn't really reflect our society or like our communities. It's disproportional. um Same thing with women being empowered. Like if you do see people who are empowered now, or organizations, like they'll have like a diversity executive, and that person will always be either a woman or a person of color. And it's like when you see other people in different executive positions, it's very rare to see, you know, someone that doesn't look like a white male. And I
yeah,
think it's us trying to transition from, or yeah, like go from that perspective of, only that specific individual can be in that position of power, to actually having, anyone, regardless of like the way they look, their age, or whatever they may be, have advice against, being in that position.
I agree with Mandy a lot. I think time has created these systematic discriminations against marginalized groups. And I always think about this example, and it's like, pretend there was like a black person, white person playing, I don't know if you guys heard this example, but they're like playing poker, like a card game. And for like hundreds of years, the white person was cheating. So they were winning every single time. And then just a couple years ago, they were like, oh, well, no cheating is allowed. It's all equal now. And then the black person is like still losing because they've had no practice to get better. So like because of all the missed opportunities these marginalized groups had, they're still, even if they have the same opportunity, they don't really, because they're still so far back and still learning. Like us as women, like we've only been able to work for the past how many years, where men have been working forever. So like we're still learning how to get up there and modify our lives to be able to work full time, and like, you know what I mean? So it's just, it
yeah.
is harder on the marginalized groups, even if we do have the same opportunities now.
Yeah, I think time and missed opportunities are something which play a major challenges in this. Isabel, do you want to add something?
I've never heard of the quote that Kiana said, but that was actually really cool. But yeah, I do believe that like even when they say no cheating, like you're right, like if there's no practice and there's no like not advantage, but like equal opportunity, then like the same way for right now, like if there's no equal opportunity with like everything we talked about with poverty, like let's just say like in 20 years like poverty is like reduced, like I just feel like people that have lived in poverty all their lives, like they may not have like the skills and the like thought process to like learn how to like invest their money and do other things like what Mandy was saying. Like they're just trying to meet their basic needs.
Yeah. And interestingly, I just came across a case study which was about, reducing these challenges to overcome inequality and poverty. So what they did was there was like a city of Porto Alegre in Brazil. So in that, the major councils, they implemented a budgeting system which allowed the residents of that city to have a say in how the public funds are spent. So they used to have a meeting once a month, and this helped them address the inequality by investing in the neglected neighborhood areas and providing, essential services to the marginalized communities, like we're talking about the indigenous groups in Canada. So, as a result, the city's poverty rates decreased, and also the city was improved the living standards, and also people were getting jobs, and they were have a literally better standard of living. Do you think something like this can happen in smaller cities like in Canada also, or even in like metro towns?
Um, we could try in smaller cities, like trying all over Canada first wouldn't be kind of ideal. I think maybe starting up with cities that do actually need that type of support, because I do think like it could be a double-edged sword as well. Like there could be individuals out there who could take advantage of this program and use it for their own nefarious means instead of like the means of the community. That is a highly possibility. This experiment looks into, you know, the good of the people and trusting the people, and I wish we could be like that all the time. Um, so yeah, I think maybe starting off with smaller towns and seeing how that goes. But I think for like bigger scales, like for even provinces or like the whole nation in itself, I don't think that's ideal.
Yeah. Yeah, no?
I pretty much had the same thought process as Mandy. I think in a perfect world that would be amazing, but I just think that there are some hurdles that might not cause, but it would be a struggle to implement something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And also, like when we are talking about like us as, I'm not talking about in the sense of whole organizations or government, I'm talking about us as an individual. Do you think it's our like humanity, or like as a humans also, we need to donate, like create awareness more about this, or just, donate charities and like support them, lower income groups, and just create more like a sense of belongingness and a fairer society, so that it can be easier for everyone to just come across as a person and not just to be considered someone else, which they are not.
I think it goes beyond empathy. I think it's just like your humanity speaking, right? Everyone is kind of related to each other in some way and form, even
Yeah,
though it may not be visible. So I think, you know, when you do help uplift others, you are helping uplift yourself and this, like your community as well. And when you live in a better community, it provides, you know, a better living standard, not only for one person, but for everyone else too.
yeah.
So,
Isabel?
I think yeah, more than just empathy, I think there's a lot of factors that play into it, like honestly like cultural factors and like personality and personal experience. Like I think people that know people that are in like lower income households, and like if you have like friends that are in in lower income households, you are more likely to feel like you want to spread awareness because you personally have a relationship with someone that's in that position, whereas like someone who's like grown up in a very wealthy household and they've never had any friends in that kind of socio-economic status, or like no like seen firsthand, and I feel like those individuals are like less likely to care, like especially if they're not from a marginalized group, they're just not going to care. And I don't really think that it's talked about in schools as much, and so there's not as much of awareness like for kids and students.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I think there are like some students, like even when I remember when I was younger, that were like bullied based on their appearance and the way they looked. And it's just like no one really took into consideration of like, oh, what their family status is. And then it was always kind of like taboo to even have anyone kind of mention that. Because, you know, you're like, oh, well, this person's dressed like this. They're wearing the same clothes that they wore like 3 or 4 days, like they're wearing the same clothes for 3 or 4 days in a row. What's up with that? Or something like that. And then people would just be rude. And like, you know, like kids don't know any better. And I think it's also like on the parents to be able to acknowledge that there are people that are going to be in an environment with students that come from families that have different socioeconomical standings, and they need to be aware of like how they're going to interact with those students to make them feel more involved instead of like putting them down because they're different from them.
Yeah. And when we talk about topics like this, it's not easy to discuss and have everyone's point of view because these are very complex issues. But I think, like it said, that Rome wasn't built in a day. So, I mean, if we have a collective effort towards this issue or create awareness among even starting from a very younger age, so that people can have their own perceptions about this, people can write more articles, people can create more awareness about this, so that we can all together create a fairer and more equitable society. I think it can make a significant difference in the lives of those who are literally struggling with poverty. So this was the topic for today. Does anyone has to add anything more to it? No. So thank you everyone for listening today.
Thanks, Dan.